Hi everybody and welcome to 3D-Pad. Today we're actually going to start the step-by-step tutorial on how to make a dwarven axe in 3ds Max. No, I'm using version 2014, but that shouldn't really affect anything. If you have any version of 3ds Max, all of these steps should be the same. To be honest, a lot of the sort of concepts of it and the ideas behind it can be carried across into programs like Blender and Maya. But yes, this is what we're going to be making today. Now, this is not my artwork, this is just grabbed from the internet. So, thank you to whoever out there did this, because it comes in very handy for this sort of thing. Now, if you decide to do a project by yourself in the future, it helps to have reference like this, which is perfectly side-on. Like, there's no perspective, it's not moving, it's in a nice pose, which is straight, that you can construct from, and you'll see why this is important once we get started. So I'll just close that. Right, so the first thing we need to do is, first thing you'll need to do is you'll need to download that image. I will include a link in the description so that you can find it easily. But the first thing we need to look at is this measurement down here, which is the dimensions of the picture. Now, when you do this in 3ds Max, these two should be the other way around, so it'll be 1600 by 1000. And basically what we need to know those measurements for is to create the image plane that we're going to be modeling from. So if we just go into 3ds Max, make sure that this viewport's active and just hit Alt and W on your keyboard. Just remember W for window, and then that'll make it sort of the size of your window that you have. So then we want to click plane and just drag out a plane, just as is anywhere. Just quickly hit G and that'll hide the grid. Now if you watched the last video, you'll know the tip about right clicking these two buttons. So just right click these two and that'll set the divisions to 1 by 1. Now this is helpful for reference imagery because if we put our model into X-ray mode or wireframe mode, we don't want to see any geometry on top of our reference image. So then we go over to here where we can set the length and width of our plane. Now, again, just remember that these two figures should be the other way around. So, as long as the ratio is the same, it doesn't matter. I mean, you could set this to 1.2 by 1 or 16 by 10, and the image will still work fine on it. There'll be no distortion, so we'll just set that up quickly. We'll set the top figure to, say 16, bottom figure to 10. And then, as you can see, that's sort of the measurements of the image that we have. Now again, the plane tool is still active, so just right click and that'll exit anything like that. Now, a very quick way of getting reference imagery onto a reference plane is to open up your Explorer window like this where your image is, and simply click, hold and drag and release it onto there. And as you can see, our image is now on there as a material. Just for the purpose of this, if you click on realistic up in the top corner and change that to shaded, that means that our model won't actually cast any shadows onto our image. So with that plane selected, just hit E on your keyboard to activate your rotate tool and then A to activate angle snap. And then what we want to do is basically stand this on its end. So just click and drag until that hits 90 degrees. You saw that numbers came up at the top here, which you can go from, or down in the bottom here. So now that that's stood upright, this is still going to be around the 0, so anything we model is basically going to lie on this image. So just hit W on your keyboard to activate your move tool and drag it back in the Y-axis. Just forward and back, just drag it all the way back. And then just quickly on your keyboard hit F and Z. F for front view and Z for zoom in to selected. So now that we have that set up, the next step is to create a cylinder. Now, if you zoom into the handle here, you can just click in the center of the handle and drag out, and it'll give you an idea of the scale that this has to be. Now, for the purpose of this tutorial, I've actually created a how-to document, which I will include in the description below, which is step by step, the screenshots and measurements and everything, so it'll be fine for you to use. But just for that purpose, I'm going to make sure that the measurements for that match the measurements in this current scene. So this cylinder in the how-to document has a radius of 2.1 and a height of 32. Now as you can see, our reference image is considerably smaller than this. So just click on the reference image, hit R for the scale tool, and just drag it out until the handle is the same width. And then just adjust it so that it fits. There we go, that'll do fine. Another step of this is to set the height segments to 1. Now, we can leave it at 5 if we wanted to, but that gives us unnecessary geometry that isn't contributing to the shape of our model, so it's just using up processing power for the sake of nothing, really. You can leave the cap segments at 1, sides at 8, make sure that smooth is turned on, and that'll just trick the lighting into thinking that this shape is a lot smoother than it actually is. So once we have that, basically our pivot point is at the bottom here. Now, pivot points are going to be a very important part of this project because there's a lot of aligning, rotating around certain points, duplicating. So in a couple of steps time, we'll run through how to adjust that. So for the next step, we just want to repeat this first step. So again, click cylinder, zoom into the base, click, drag out, let go, and then drag again. And as you can see, the height is still moving on the right hand side of the screen. So just click again, E on your keyboard, make sure that angle snap is still on. If it isn't, you can just click this or hit A on your keyboard. And then rotate it by 90 degrees so it's flat. Now the measurements for this, according to the tutorial sheet, are 3.7 and 2.25. Now, as you can see, that's actually put the pivot point at the top of this shape. Now, we don't want that, so the quick way to solve this is basically just rotate it around that point by 180 degrees. W on your keyboard, drag it down, and then that's basically that shape more or less done on the base there, because this is just going to be a low poly model. There's not going to be any sculpting or anything like that involved. So the next stage that we have to do is, since this shape at the bottom, and then this one, and this one, this one, this one, and the one up at the top, basically all of these are more or less the same shape. So we can just reuse this geometry instead of drawing it out, putting the measurements in again. So to do this, with your move tool, hold shift on your keyboard and drag it straight up. And then make sure that that's set to copy. This is set to 1, hit OK. Again, hold shift, drag it straight up. OK. And then just a couple more times. Remember, when you want to duplicate, just hold shift. You can do this for any tool. It doesn't have to be the move tool. You can use the scale tool or the rotate tool, and it'll do the same job. Now, the top one on this particular reference is actually shorter than all of the rest. So this is a good opportunity for us to get used to the axis with the scale tool. So you can see here just the edge of the reference image coming out there. And this is considerably taller. So hit R on your keyboard to activate your scale tool. And just remember that this should be like this, because if you hit R again, it changes again and again. So just make sure that this is the icon you have. And then hover over Y so that that line goes yellow, and then just scale it down in that axis. That's basically all we're wanting to do with that. Now, the next step that we want to do is we want to align all of these cylinders to the handle. Because if you look down here, the handle isn't in the center of those. And since we're using the handle as almost our parent for our center, we don't want to move this. So to select multiple objects, you just want to click on your first one, hold Control on your keyboard, and then click the others. If you want to deselect an object without deselecting everything else, just hold Alt and click on the object you want to deselect. So again, Control for selecting more, Alt for selecting less. And then we want to hit W on the keyboard, and then we're going to move it up to this tool, which is Align. So we want to click on the Align tool, click on our handle, and as you can see, all of these cylinders that we had up here have now moved to the pivot point of this handle. Now, that's fine, because now this is perfectly central, but we don't want all of them to be in this place. So just untick the Z position and they will space back out to their original position, but still be central with the handle. You have to be careful with these two, because depending on which view you're using, these do change. One might be Z, one might be Y. But just do it by eye, and you'll get an idea for which one works. So once you've done that, just hit OK. And then that centers all our objects in one particular place. Now, again, surprise, surprise, we want to create more cylinders. It's kind of your bread and butter of low poly modeling, really. But what we want to do this time is we want to do this central bit here. So click in the middle, drag it out until it meets that silhouette, keep dragging, and click again. E, make sure that angle snap is on, and rotate so that the pivot point's at the bottom. And then just move it into position. Now I can tell you on the how-to document for this, the radius is 2.5, and then the height, since this is in minus, we're actually going to have to rotate this again. The height is 6. So again, if that happens, just E for rotate. Rotate 180 degrees around the pivot point. You'll be fine. You might need to do some adjustment with the location of these smaller cylinders once everything's in place, just to make sure that it's spaced out evenly and that everything works. So now what we're going to do is we're actually going to adjust the pivot point of this object, and we want it in the center because we're going to be rotating this around its center point to get this cylinder that goes across here as well as the one that sits in the center. So to do that, just go up to your panel up here and click hierarchy, affect pivot point only, and center to object. Now that puts it at the exact center of the mass of your selected object. So once you've done that, again, you can either click affect pivot point only to deactivate the pivot point edit, or click on create, and it'll bring you back to your edit mode. So hit E on your keyboard for rotate, hold shift again, and make sure that you hover over this line and rotate it by 90 degrees, and just click OK. Now as you can see, this cylinder is considerably shorter than the reference behind it, so just hit R again, hover over X, and scale it out so that it matches. So now that that shape is the right dimensions, we know that it's central to this object. We can then reuse this to create the other one. So again, just rotate tool, hold shift, and then if you hover your mouse over the center line here, click and drag until it hits 90 degrees and click OK. As you can see, that then gives us this quite nice little feature part on the bottom of the handle here. But if you look at the reference imagery, there's also multiple versions of this. So to save us time with duplicating, instead of dragging each one up and getting them all into the same place, we can actually attach all of these objects together so that we only have to do it 2 or 3 times. So what we can do is just click on the central one here, the first one we made. Right click, convert to editable poly, and then that gives you a lot more editing options. The one we want for this purpose is attach, so just click attach, click that cylinder, and then right click an empty space to stop attaching items. And as you can see, all of the ones with the edges visible is now one singular object. So anything that we do with this object, it'll happen to all of these cylinders here. So if you just go back to our front view using F and then zoom in using Z, hold shift, drag it straight up, okay, and then drag it straight up again. Now as I said before, we are going to have to do some sort of fine tuning with our object placement here. So you can just do this bit by eye. There's no need for exact measurements in this case. If you need to, you can actually scale down parts as well, so just hit the R tool and you can scale that bit down, scale that one down, hit W to move it up just a bit. Again, move this one up a bit, and then we'll move this bit down. Maybe move this bit a bit higher because we don't want it to clash with our central piece. But again, now we have the problem of these selected items here aren't central with the handle. So again, click one, hold Control, and highlight the other ones. You can let go of Control once you're done selecting. hit a line, hit the handle. Now this should remember our settings from the last time, so we can just hit OK, and we know that these are perfectly central now. Now if you want to have a quick look at how detailed this model is at this stage, if you hit 7 on your keyboard, it'll bring up the polys and verts up in this corner. Now, to give you some sort of guideline of poly count, the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 platforms are only capable of rendering about 1.2 million polys in any one frame. So that's why it's important to keep the resolution of your models down to a minimum when you're developing this stuff for games. I mean, we could make this single axe maybe, I don't know, 2 million polys if we wanted to model in all of the scratches on the blade and the gem and the detail on the blade. But for this particular purpose, we don't want to do that. So yeah, we've covered a lot of tools. We've covered the move tool, the pivot points, duplicating objects, aligning them, setting up reference imagery. So we've actually covered quite a lot in this lesson. There's going to be a couple more parts to this tutorial, which will be, well, if they're not already up by the time you're watching this, they will be up shortly. As I've already said, I'll include this image in the description down below, along with a link to the step-by-step written tutorial. If this goes too fast for you, or you want to look at it on the go, or whatever, then that's fully available for you to do so. So yes, we'll call it a day at this stage. In the next episode, what we will cover is we'll start by making this central box here, which is going to be sort of the holder for the blades, and then we'll run through making the blades step by step, making them from a single plane, how to adjust the shape of them by converting them to an editable poly, adding detail in, giving them thickness, making sure that this blade edge is thinner than the rest of the blade, and demonstrating how to make this blade that we'll model here perfectly the same on the other side and perfectly central to this. So yes, we should be doing this in the next maybe episode, maybe 2. But if you would like any help, if you're stuck with anything, if there's anything I've missed to explain, please leave a comment down below and I will cover it as soon as possible. Thank you again for watching. It does mean a lot to me. It's nice that I'm able to share the knowledge that I've picked up over the years of 3D applications, and that you're willing to learn it. So yes, stay tuned for the other parts, and fingers crossed, by the end of those you will have a fully modeled 3D axe. So, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and I will see you next time.